Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
So we're back with season 3.
We are, James, where we have got lots of interesting guests, excellent subjects, all focused on helping you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Ah, very good. Which I suppose begs the question, what have you been up to since season 2?
So I've been enjoying the summer. The sun has been amazing. And been a bit in the garden, a bit out in the sun, just generally enjoying it. I haven't been on holiday because now my kids are a bit older. It's a September holidays for us when the prices are a bit cheaper. So Santorini, here I come.
I have been interrailing. It's the first time I have been interrailing since I was 18. And I can tell you, A, interrailing is much more fun when you've got some money behind you because you don't need to eat nearly so much spam. But B, 3 weeks with 2 teenage daughters is a little bit more than any one man could cope with.
I find a week is the sweet spot for me with my kids now. I think feeling is mutual as well.
So what are we talking about today then?
So today, James, we are talking about AI and work and how you get the best out of it.
All right, but we've done AI before a wee bit, haven't we?
We have, but this is a little bit more tangible because we have an expert who will get to introduce himself in a second on the actual practical uses of AI, as opposed to
the strategic governance.
The strategic governance. What do we call it? Management fluff. Is it management fluff?
Yeah, management fluff.
And then are the robots going to take over the world?
So without further ado, then, I shall introduce our guest. So today we've got a chap called James Crawford with us. James, I think you'd probably be better off introducing yourself because you will do a far better job of it than I will.
So I'm a career business transformation leader. And basically what I've done is set up services, taken down services, work with organizations in a whole range of different programs in different sectors, both public sector, private sector and charities. But I'm particularly interested in AI at the moment because it's suddenly become a very useful tool in all of the things that I've done in the past. I kind of held off with for quite some time. I did look at AI in 2018. I was doing strategy work and continuous improvement and all sorts of organization development work at that point in time. But AI seemed very mysterious, very technical, difficult to use. If you had an office with no windows, then you're probably the type of person that would have really got into it. But for me, in my work out in the front office, in customer service, in finance, in operations, engineering, it didn't really seem to be particularly useful. So I cracked on all the way through to 2023. And at that point, I had a ChatGPT moment. And then suddenly I could see how it would be useful in all sorts of different areas, a practical tool that people in my kind of role could really find useful, working with the stakeholders inside and outside a company. So that's when I really got interested and started pivoting all of my work towards AI, because it suddenly became something really useful that I felt that all organizations need to take note of.
So I think what will be helpful then, we obviously both use AI, but maybe if we started off telling you how we use it, and then you give us a mark, are we in the right general parish or not? Or are we missing something? So, a bit of a self-audit, let's start with that.
Okay, fire away.
So we use it a lot actually in preparing episodes. So if we've got a particular subject that we want to talk about, we use it to flesh out, I should say, not flash out. I'm very careful where I go with that. We use it to flesh out the topic. And then the other thing I'm using it for actually is I've written one book. I'm in the process of writing a second book looking at failures and what exactly happened. So I'm using it a lot for researching things. So I suppose that's where I'm with it. Jimmy, where are you, mate?
I guess aside from how we use it for the podcast, there's a few things for me similar to you, James, in the content creation. And I do find it's quite useful as a sounding board as well. So I think you can ask it, this is what I'm thinking. Have you got any views on that? And I find it gives you sometimes some challenging perspectives on how you're thinking about things. And it can give you sort of stats and information to back up or contradict your views. So idea development, content creation for a couple. I've got one great story just to share with you, James, where I used it recently. I changed one of the batteries in my remote controls for the car fobs. I took it down to Timpson's. They charged me 25 quid to do it. So when the second one went, I thought, I'm saving myself 25 quid. I've got this £2 battery, I can do it myself. So I put it in, nothing, absolutely nothing. Fiddled about, did all sorts of things, nothing. So in the end, I had to ring up the dealer and say, look, I've got this problem. What do you recommend? They said, bring it in. We'll do a diagnostic on it for £264 not to fix it, just to have a look at it. But then I went on ChatGPT, gave me a few things to try, and one of them worked. And you know what it was? It was peel the sticker off the battery and then put it in. See it? It worked. Simplest thing. Saved me hundreds of pounds. So you can judge from that story whether I'm an idiot for trying to save £25 and then taking hours of my time, or if I've saved a fortune. Don't know. But that was how AI helped me in that example.
So go on then. How good are we then? Are we par for the course? Bearing in mind that we're a couple of old blokes, I think, we're embracing the technology. But are we par for the course? Are we missing tricks? What would you say?
I think that's a great place to start, to be honest. So, Jimmy, you were talking about having a bit of an interaction with the chatbot. So that's the key to it, really. So you don't always frame your full question up front, because that's just not the way we're primed to talk to people, whether you do it by voice or whether you type it in. So getting something going, starting to think through, where do you want this conversation to go? What information do you want? What would be helpful? Ask clarifying questions. It's adopting that kind of natural style with the chatbot is really helpful, whichever mode you actually interact with it. So that's one of the key things which I do try and talk to people about, to treat it not as technology, but almost like, a person, someone who is sat next to you, who knows what they're talking about. How would you frame the question? How would you go about getting the information out? How would you lead and manage the conversation to get what you want? And whether it's researching new episodes, whether it's trying to think up really tricky questions for your next guest, whether it's diving deep into a request for a proposal that you might have if you're going through a procurement exercise at the moment, or lessons learned that you might want to glean when you're setting up a new project. Whatever it is, there are good practical techniques just to be in natural language working through that particular topic. So I'd say that's a great place to start. And
James, that's quite different, isn't it, from how we think about search engines, where it's just put in a thing and you get back stuff. And, it doesn't iterate. Whereas what I've found is one of the big benefits is the more it learns about me and how I do things and how I think about things, or how I talk or how I write, and the more it learns about the projects I'm doing, the better it can do.
If an expert came and sat next to you, you wouldn't start with a 6-minute spiel and tell them everything and then fold your arms and say, right, now you can respond. You'd start with sort of, general positioning. They would then say, okay, well, here are some things that you might need to look for. Then you'd start talking about your organizational context, and maybe they'd provide a bit more depth in some of those areas. Then you dive into some of the particular areas that you need to probe in an interview, or the kind of skills that people in different organizations have. And it's that natural development of a conversation, which people have found really quite striking with chatbots and very practical.
Well, before we go into actually how to use the AI, your point about an expert is really quite interesting. So I am a big fan of Gemini. Jimmy uses ChatGPT, and there are a whole host of different AIs that you could use. Are they all the same, or are there better ones for better jobs? How would you choose which AI to use?
I think a lot of them are broadly similar in terms of the knowledge, the breadth of the knowledge on the internet that they were trained on. So they're all containing a lot of similar material, but they do present it in different ways, and they are fine-tuned for different groups of people. So it's partly which is the best chatbot for a particular job, and they've all got strengths and weaknesses. And it's partly how you interact with it as well. So if you use something called Pi.ai, personal intelligence.ai, that's really good for kind of, short, sharp conversations about, household insurance, or fixing the windscreen wipers on your car, or when should I mow my lawn, or troubleshooting things in the house. It's much more kind of short and snappy. Gemini is kind of more general, and it's got good links out to the internet. If you want to kind of do some research in terms of whether it is relationship advice, or, the new car that you want to buy, then Perplexity.ai is very good, because that's very much fine-tuned for searching out information and bringing it together in a really insightful way, together with all the citations that you could use. But each of them has got kind of, different strengths and weaknesses. And of course, I've got to mention the Mistral.ai, which is the Europe's premier large language model. That's based in France. It's smaller than some of the others in terms of its business, but I found it very quick. A lot of people prefer it to ChatGPT or others in terms of its style and its language.
It would be worth us putting some of these links in the show notes as well, so people can find them easily. But one thing I did notice, and maybe this isn't a fair comparison, but I noticed that Meta have got an AI inbuilt into Facebook now, and it prompts you with some questions you could ask about any particular post. And I found that to be particularly inaccurate. And it's not the best example, but I'm a Nottingham Forest fan, and when there's a post on Forest, it will say, do you want to know more about these transfers or whatever? And it will tell you absolute nonsense when you click on it for more information about players that don't play for Forest or stuff in the article that doesn't exist. So I found that to be quite different, whereas using ChatGPT or Gemini, I haven't gone far wrong as far as I've seen it in terms of the information I get back.
Yeah. Well, it's disappointing if the Meta one is bad. They've particularly focused on open source software. So they've got this big model called Llama. They've released it so anybody can take a copy of it, use it for free, fine tune it for their own particular use. So that's particularly helpful when it comes to organizations taking it on board to provide private, tailored advice for the employees or for their customers. And they're able to kind of take it on board and test it fully. It's disappointing that it's got so many hallucinations, particularly about Nottingham Forest.
They're basic stuff.
I live in Nottingham. There are plenty of people with hallucinations.
It knows about as much as Forest as James does.
Yeah,
not a lot, to be honest.
Yeah. But then there's an interesting point, though, isn't there? Because it's a bit like having a conversation with a person and getting information from a person. The question becomes, how much do you trust this person's judgments?
When it comes to Nottingham Forest, for instance, you'll find that a couple which have got live links out to the internet are going to be more accurate, because these large language models go through a huge training process which takes many, many months. And then they've got a testing and a release process which takes many more months. So by the time they actually hit the streets, they could be a year out of date in terms of their information.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so that might be a feature of the Llama model which Meta uses. Whereas what Google does and Perplexity does is it actually provides an interface out to the live internet as well.
As well as recording this podcast, we help individuals, teams and entire organisations achieve outstanding results.
If you'd like to find out more about how we can help you, please get in touch. Email either jimmy@ajobdonewell.com or james@ajobdonewell.com. So I've got a model, James, that you suggest people use to get the best output, which you call the 5 Ps. So could you run through that and explain that to us a wee bit, please?
Yep, sure. So the question is, how do you get the most out of this, particularly in a business context? And what I did is I put together what I call 5 Ps, which basically is thinking a bit like a business analyst. And one of the things you need to do is to direct the chatbot's attention to the area of the internet which is going to be most useful for you. So for instance, if it's ingested everything from Reddit all the way through to Wikipedia, through to Google, through to every published website, every academic website, you've got all sorts of different niches on the internet. And what you need to do is to try and prompt it so the kind of output it comes up with is relevant to what you're actually asking. So I was saying that you first of all pick a persona. So if you're speaking to an expert, who would it be? Is it a university professor who's, a leader in materials management? Is it someone who's understood the navigation challenges in London and knows all of the streets? Is it someone who is specialist in HR and a leading thinker on better recruitment and how to make better hires? Who is it that you would really want to direct this question to? So if you just describe that in a sentence or two, that will then immediately direct the attention of the chatbot to that kind of area of the internet, and you'll have a more productive stream of information coming back to you.
If, for example, James, I was wanting to think about how I progress my career, I could turn around to it and say, act as a expert career coach, and that would give me a better answer than just if I just said, how do I progress my career?
Yes, because you're kind of giving it a cue in terms of the kind of conversation you want, the kind of sources of information you'd like it to mine. And when it goes through its probabilistic building up of sentences, it'll give more weight to that kind of output that's going to be more useful to you.
Yeah.
That's the first one, kind of pick a persona. You don't need to labor it. You could just, do it in a few words or a couple of sentences, give it a bit of context, and you'll find that should help. The second one is to give it even more context information. So, for instance, if you're looking at your career, you could say, right, I am currently a software engineer or a taxi driver or an innovation manager in a manufacturing firm. This is my background, but what I'd like to do is develop these particular skills because I'd like to move to France or have 50% onto my salary or break out of the rut I'm in because I'm finding it a bit stale. That's all, again, good contextual information. You might also upload your CV, press the plus button and upload your CV so it's got that background there. Your conversation may have been triggered by an article that you've read recently about a new career or a new type of skills that are coming through that particularly got you thinking. You could try uploading that as well and say, this kind of got me thinking, but it's just one example of something which I could move into. So providing that context, the more you make it your own conversation, the more you make it a completely unique conversation, the more relevant, accurate and insightful the information that will come back to you. So those are the first two ones. They're kind of pick a persona, prime it with the contextual information that you're after, and then you can prompt it, which is what's your ask of it? Are you asking it to think of 10 careers that you could move into? Are you asking it for new ideas that are particularly up and coming in your particular part of the world? Do you want it to create a learning plan? Do you want it to tell you where you can go for careers advice? What are you actually asking it? So be clear about that.
Some question about prompts. So one of the things I didn't say to start off with is we actually use Midjourney, which is a graphics package. So it's AI graphics. It will draw stuff for you. But what is really quite interesting is you can ask it to do the same thing and you'll get different responses each time. So they're similar-ish pictures, but they're not the same and they're far from it. Presumably the same is true with a language AI. You ask it the same thing and it will give you different answers each time. So it's not providing you with the truth, if the truth exists. It's providing you with what it thinks is the best answer for you at that moment in time.
That's correct. And obviously the large language model providers take a lot of pain to try and be as accurate as possible. So, they will go to relevant and authentic sources of information rather than try and read off Reddit all the time. So they will, behind the scenes, try and direct its attention to the kind of accuracy of information that you want. But yes, because it's got a bit of a randomizer in there, that's partly what makes it a very natural interface and quite conversational, but it also steers it off in different directions each time. And sometimes they're a bit more profitable than others.
Yeah, but it's only as good as the information that it has read.
Well, it
can't be any better than that, can it?
Yes, it's a combination because it's read so much information from so many different sources, some of which contradicts itself.
Yeah.
If you ask it 2 + 2, it may give you the answer 4, but if it's already had a bit of a chat with you and you're talking about people making mistakes, you're talking about maybe assumptions going wrong, if that's the theme of the chat, you may say, well, it's 2 + 2, and it may say 5, because it's also read that thousands of times. So it'll try and detect the nuance of the chat that you're having and then bring the relevant information to you. So the answer will be different, partly because of the context of the chat and partly because of that randomizing element, which makes it interesting to speak to and which does make it different for you each time you do it, as well as different for everyone else.
Back to your 5 Ps model.
So we've done the first 4, which is pick your persona, the kind of expert you want.
Yeah.
Prime it with the background information and the context you can. Give it a prompt, which is exactly what you want it to do. The 4th one is telling you how it should be presented. Are you after paragraphs of information? Are you after a table, bullet points, a PowerPoint slide, whatever it might be? Be prescriptive in terms of how you'd like it to. You could say, please give me the high-level view at first, and I will then tell you which bits to dive into in more detail. You could say, give me a 6-page report. So that's how it presented. And then the 5th final one is perfect it, which is all about that iteration at the end. So once it's come up with its output for you, then you can give it feedback, tell it what you want more of, what you want less of, tell it to do it again, start from scratch, whatever it might be, but you perfect the information that you want. And so, after a few minutes, you've got what you came for.
It's a really nice, simple model. 5 Ps is quite easy to understand, and you can see why logically it makes sense. You get your better answers. So, yeah, I really like that.
Because it's actually, I suppose, James, a continuous improvement way of getting an answer, isn't it? So instead of, I need to write the best prompt and it's one shot and done, it really is all about, what do I think of that? How am I going to make it better? And gradually refining it.
And if you can pause and think at the beginning of a conversation, you generally have a better conversation, whatever the setting is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So that's how to use it. But have you any examples you can give us of where this has been done? So if I was, I don't know, I made something. If I was a transformation manager in an organisation, what sort of problems would I be looking at? How would I use it?
Well, I'll tell you about the first example I used it for. And when I first came across it, I was working in a housing association. And what we were doing is setting up a program to refresh systems, clean a lot of data, completely reset and refocus our processes, and then put them onto a new platform. So one of the things that struck me is that ChatGPT, which is the one I was using at the time, has read every lessons learned report of organizations that are trying to platform their data, trying to update and modernize their organization, both good and bad. It's looked at all the conferences where case studies were presented. It's looked at all of the government analyses where things went wrong and they were made public. And so I started off by saying, which of the sections of a project document can it actually start to complete? And of course, the answer was all of them. What it did need, though, of course, was a lot of information from me about, okay, what are our objectives? What are we trying to achieve? What brainstorms have we done within the meetings? What emails are shaping how we want this project to kick off? So the more information I could feed up to it, the more of a starting point it had. Then, of course, you could upload your template for a project document, whatever it might be in your organization, and it'll then take all the information it finds relevant on the internet, brings together the information that you've provided it, and come up with a first draft of a project document. But that's the basic model that you can use. And it'll then do a lot of the work for you in just a few minutes that would have typically taken you several hours over a period of several days. And suddenly you've got a first draft, which you can start to work on, which you can share with people, and which contains the essence of what you're trying to achieve, as well as the wisdom of the wider industry.
But so it really is using it as a starter for 10 almost. I mean, it doesn't really matter what your business problem is, whether, I don't know, you're an HR person and you need to develop a disciplinary procedure, or if you're doing an outsourcing contract, or it really doesn't matter. It's just about being clear what you want it to do for you.
Yeah, and that goes back to one of your early points about, will AI nick our jobs, and the subject of one of your other podcasts. But where it's at the moment is it's a very, very powerful tool for people to accelerate the research, the thinking, the brainstorming, the optioneering, the drafting, the reviewing of these kind of documents, for instance, or business processes, or the design of services for customers, or the way that different teams will work together where there's maybe been a historical problem, whatever it might be. And because it hoovers up the wisdom from many places and it builds on the information that you provided as well, then you've got a great starting point for discussion. And if it does make some mistakes or point in the wrong direction to some information that wasn't quite correct or isn't quite what you want, that's fine, because you're just in the drafting stage. And that'll all get filtered out with the conversations you have. But you'll be able to start with those conversations, in half an hour's time, instead of fix a meeting for 2 weeks and hope that you've done the preparation in time. So it can just accelerate the way that things are done.
Just to pick up on one point you made there. So as an example, if I'm running a team or a unit of people delivering customer service, there are quite a lot of uses in what you said that I could do. Depending on what my problems are, you could put in your problems, whether that's team members aren't behaving right, or you're having trouble with your bosses, or you need to update your process maps, or you need to find ways of improving how you adhere to certain regulations, whatever it is. It could give you some ideas. It might not give you the perfect answer, but as a starting point, it's probably a useful starting point, isn't it? For many, many of the day-to-day problems that you have as a kind of manager.
It is. And again, that iteration comes into it as well. So if you're asking for, process improvements, you can say, please give me, 5 ways I can improve this particular process. You may upload it. You may have a diagram on your screen. You can take a picture of it and then simply pass that to the chatbot. Provide it some context and then say, where would I look to improve this process? Particularly if you've got some information about where it's falling short at the moment. Yeah. It'll then probably come up with some decent ideas, but probably ones you've thought of already. So you say, okay, please give me another 5 which are quite different to those, which maybe other people wouldn't have thought about or tried before. And it goes around again and it gives you 5 more. And there might be something of a bit more interest there. You can then say, all right, give me another 5 really wacky ones this time, really off the wall ideas, but they're going to be really powerful and have a great experience for the customer of this particular process. And you actually find as you go through that process, it'll actually come up with something which you haven't thought of before. That does actually either get you thinking, or you think, I could build on that. That could be really useful. So it's a great brainstorming tool.
Yeah.
And you'll find that, again, low risk is, if it makes a mistake and comes up with an idea that's just not practical at all, it doesn't matter because you're going through that particular stage. So that's where I say people should start. Just get familiar with interacting with the chatbots. You don't need to go away, write out a decent project brief, put a business case together for all the time you're going to spend on it. That's not where to start with using these tools. It's very much about familiarity, incorporating it into the way that you work, using it for inspiration, and then the business case will come later. But if you've got that relationship with it, you've understood what the kind of thing it can do and the kind of thing it's not so good at, you'll find that it just becomes more and more invaluable to you. And eventually that'll deliver the real process improvement or the real service redesign.
Yeah.
It really is going to be a benefit to people.
As well as recording this podcast, we help individuals, teams, and entire organisations achieve outstanding results.
If you'd like to find out more about how we can help you, please get in touch. Email either jimmy@ajobdonewell.com or james@ajobdonewell.com. So those are all the things it can do to help us. But what should we be careful about, James? And what would our watch outs be, do you think?
So business confidentiality. Chatbots, as I say, go through a long learning process where they crunch all of the data that's made available to it. Now, of course, part of the data that's available is the stuff that you've uploaded. So if you've got documents at work or personal documents about healthcare or insurance or anything else, if you upload those to a chatbot, it'll treat that as fair game. It'll have it in its memory banks. And then when it comes to a future learning program ready for the next model, it'll use that as an inspiration for how do things work? What kind of questions do people come up with? What kind of material can I draw on? It won't save it away in a database and then send your insurance document to someone who asked about it in 8 months' time. But what it will do is draw inspiration from the way that document's put together. And you may find that some of the issues concerned do feature in a future model if someone else is asking a question about something broadly similar.
Well, and it's interesting, sorry to cut across, but I was asking, as I said earlier, I was writing a second book and I was asking about the post office. And I had written a blog post about the post office a while back, and one of the sources it referred back to me was what I had written. So yeah, the minute it's out there or the AI has got it, it becomes public knowledge.
There are ways of making sure that the information is private, which is particularly important in a business context for personally identifiable information, company finances, policies, pricing mechanisms, the kind of stuff which is really useful to put to a chatbot. You don't want that going into the wider learning process. So you can either press the temporary chat button, which means normally that document or that chat isn't used in future. But the flip side of that, it's also not held in your history. So you can't go and restart the conversation at a future point. Or for certain levels, if you use the paid versions, some of those incorporate privacy as well. But you need to look at the terms and conditions. So it's worth checking. Either anonymize it, go for a temporary chat, make sure you've got privacy, or somehow make sure that your data is protected where it needs to be. A lot of people put their lives out on social media, where they're going, when they're traveling with their family, what they're thinking, what they're doing, all sorts of information out there, which kind of makes you think, even on platforms like LinkedIn, which is mainly for a business audience. So I think the key thing is to be aware. How is your data potentially going to be used? And then you have to ask yourself the question, and do I mind? And because we've got AI bots which are becoming quite intelligent and not only used by business people, but also by scammers, I think it's definitely worth looking into how are scammers starting to use the information that's out there? How can I protect myself against some of these scams? But also, do I want to continue feeding some of this information out into the internet? How do I become more private? Well, how do I manage the risks? And it's going to become more and more of a topic that we all need to look at over the coming months and years.
Yeah, again, it's a little bit like the old adage, if you're going to go on holiday, don't use your local taxi firm because they therefore know that you've all gone away. Now, is that paranoia or is that a very sensible thing to do? I suppose you're right. It depends on how you feel about these things.
Yes, and
I look forward, James, to the next time you're trying to get a Nottingham taxi to come pick you up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. That's the gaps. What about the future then, James?
So at the moment, the name of the game for many organizations is what we call augmentation, which is how can these tools help internal people do a better job in terms of what they're doing? And it may be that someone is in the contact center, they are talking to customers, but there could be a bot which is giving them feedback on the way the call's going at the moment, special offers, relevant information from the customer's contact. Did they report this same problem 6 months ago? Is there a trend? Things which will be very difficult for an agent to actually look at and when they're trying to concentrate on speaking to the customer and also look at the customer relationship management database. The AI could be working behind the scenes to augment that particular process. So that's a low risk, but very, very valuable way of progressing because it helps the agent to do that. Once the technology is mature enough and once the organization's mature enough, then you come to the automation stage where you can actually let the AI lead on the conversation. It will do the searching behind the scenes. It will understand what the customer wants, provide feedback, reassurance, answer questions, give the information that's needed. But that level of automation for many organizations isn't quite there yet in terms of the quality, the reliability, and the confidence they can have before going out to an external audience. But that's the direction of travel. And the best systems at the moment can do that, and they can do it very well. But it's up to each organization to move along that journey and think through what does this mean, not just in terms of how do I automate the service, but the really powerful stuff beyond that is, and how do I completely change the service? So how do you flip the service on its head to provide a very different experience for the people that are paying the organization's bills? So again, there are several steps of that journey which will unfold over time. And there are people involved in thinking that through, guiding the process, setting up the systems, providing the expertise, reassuring the customer, providing that human-to-human contact. So there's lots and lots of work for us all to do for, I think, quite some time before the alleged machines take all our jobs, commandeers a spaceship and leave planet Earth.
But the conversation really flows at two levels then, doesn't it? So there's A, how can I as an individual use it? And you've given us a lot of pointers on that, particularly the 5P model. But then there really is a much more strategic conversation, which is how are you going to use this in your organization? But really, you would get what you ask the AI to do, which is your point about Amazon versus the telco. Yeah, which really comes down to company values.
On the former bit, on the how do I use it, I think also it's been really helpful to sort of think about the breadth of it, how I as an individual can use it rather than how we use it strategically, and how both solving problems, interactions, and how you build those interactions. I think hopefully that's given the audience some real food for thought for how they personally can get the most out of AI as well.
And so, James, if people want to contact you or want to, specifically the service that you guys offer, where should they look? Where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to bring the people together and make sure that we address people's hopes, fears, expectations, concerns, questions. Everybody comes having listened to the BBC News, watched at the website, had all sorts of conversations with people about what this means for the future of their jobs and their organisation. But once we've been through the process of change processes, changing services, ultimately it changes organisations' business strategy. So that kind of challenge is actually going to be apparent for all of our organisations. But the place to start when I first sit down with people is taking them through the process I call the 3 I's, which is inform, imagine, initiate, which leads on to benefit in money, which leads on to benefit in quality of service. So I find that's a really good positive start for people's AI journey.
Very good. If people people want to talk to you, James, what's their best way of getting contact?
So either James Crawford on LinkedIn or through the website touchpointchange.co.uk. So my contact details are all there. I'm always happy to talk with people about what their next steps are. I'm always curious to find out where people are up to. And if they haven't really embarked on the journey so far, what's holding them up? What are their fears and concerns? What do they see other people doing? So starting off with just, a really interesting, informative conversation that then hopefully will lead to a relationship when we can actually work together on their services.
So we can put those links in the show notes as well.
Absolutely, we will. Lovely. Very informative. Thank you very much for your time, James. That was really very interesting.
Thanks, James.
Oh, sorry. One other question. So will AI make Jimmy thicker? That's what I really need to know.
Is that possible, James?
Well,
Will it make James cleverer?
Will that bit get edited out of the podcast? That's the real question.
to be honest, it has the chance to do both. It depends how you use it. So bets are being placed.
All bets are on.
That's a whole nother episode.
All right, lovely. That was really helpful.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers now.
As well as recording this podcast, we help individuals, teams, and entire organisations achieve outstanding results.
If you'd like to find out more about how we can help you, please get in touch. Email either jimmy@ajobdonewell.com or james@ajobdonewell.com.